Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hoping that, hi, Sara.
Hello.
Great to see you. So thanks so much for agreeing to come and meet with us this evening, and to everyone who's here. And it's always a bit weird when you're kind of talking to the trees outside as well as all of you. So I'm going to pinch a line from you, Sara. Welcome to an evening of equality, creativity, and politics. Everything's politics, of course, within that. But I'm really excited about all the things we're going to chat about this evening. So thanks so much for being here. One of the questions that we've asked everyone we've been interviewing in this series, I see a hi from Selma, who you'll know well, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah, one of the things that we've asked everyone is, now that we're in a different place with a lockdown, what would you say you would keep from it? And what would you lose from it?
I think I had quite a jammy lockdown. I mean, you read what some other people have been through, and I was quite jammy, really. I mean, I work from home anyway, so it wasn't a huge shift, any of that for me. I think I've very much discovered my inner introvert. So I would normally spend a lot of the summer running around all over the place and doing book festivals and all that kind of stuff. And while I really quite like public speaking, I think I realised over lockdown how much that was taking up of my time. So I think it's not so much what I'm going to keep and what I'm going to lose, but how I'm going to shift maybe for me. And perhaps do fewer of those kind of events over the summer, because I do enjoy doing them, but just maybe pick fewer of them to do, because I have quite enjoyed being at home and hanging out with my family. And about 2 months into lockdown, we got a dog. We got a re-rescue, and I just love her. I'm just totally in love with wee Dottie. And so, yeah, those things have been really, really good things. I suppose. And also, I got to chat to my upstairs neighbourhood, kind of knew vaguely, but it turned out we could talk every day. She would open the window upstairs and I would sit outside the back garden and we'd have just like 10-15 minute talk every day, and we get on really well. So I definitely want to keep that. Losing things, I suppose, we have always said that we wanted, when my husband stops working, that we want to move to the West Coast, to move to Glasgow. And this was kind of been on our list for a wee while. And I think we realised, because of lockdown, and actually because we both were ill and we both had COVID, I had it not terribly, terribly badly, but I had it to the point that I was kind of worried about breathing. And it really made me think, right, anything we're going to do, we need to do it now. And so we put our flat in the market and we started looking for things in Glasgow. And it's just given us a kind of impetus to not hold back on doing things that we know we want to do, and to try and go with our dreams a little bit, I suppose, and not sort of defer things all the time. So I suppose one of the things that I'll be giving up is living in Edinburgh. Eventually, when we get there, but I'll be taking up living in Glasgow. So we'll see how that one goes. But I think that the overarching thing about that for me is, all these things that you think you want to do, grab it, do it, because you don't know when things are going to change. And I think that's something I'm definitely taking away from lockdown and from being quite ill.
Yeah. It sounds like it wasn't a good experience at all, having the COVID.
No, I mean, I have a friend who was in hospital and she was ventilated, and her experience sounds really terrifying. It's just very difficult when you can't breathe properly. I was at home, it was very early on, they weren't doing community testing, so I never got tested, I didn't get sent to hospital, but I was breathing kind of, that thing, and it was pretty scary, really. So, yeah.
So is that going to end up in a novel at some point?
I suppose it might end up somewhere. I think what tends to happen is it goes through kind of weird transmutation, where you have an experience, you fall out with somebody, or you decide you love something, or you hate something, or you hurt your leg or whatever, and somewhere in 2 years away, a character does something that isn't the thing that you did. You know, probably no character is going to get COVID, but maybe somebody will get a really bad chest infection at some point, or have to face their mortality a little bit, or something like that. And you draw on that kind of life experience of, you know, something that's parallel, if you like, and that tends to be how it kind of works. I tend not to draw, especially since I write so much historical stuff. So you have to think about, you know, what was it like having TV before antibiotics? What was it like? You know, that's where it will come in. That's where it will come in handy, I suppose.
And you're such a prolific writer. It's amazing. And you know, I first knew you through the last independence referendum, and we'll come to that. But I also knew your books, and as part of a book club, we read some of your books as well. I used to work with someone who had quite a big crush on you, actually, and he saw you in a bookshop in Stockbridge once and came back to the office very excited about that. I won't name him.
I'm blushing.
But if he's here, if he's watching, he'll...
Hi there.
So I was, already a fan of what you do. I'm a big fan of your Twitter feed.
Thank you.
I love it, and recommend everyone follows Sara on Twitter if they don't already. Did you always want to be an author? Is that...
No, not at all, actually. I was obsessed with story. I was kind of a really weird kid, and very weird in my family. And my two brothers, and they're both very sporty and very much extrovert types, and sort of very sociable. And I'm this kind of weird introvert, slightly gothy kid who just wanted to read all the time. And I grew up in a house where we really didn't have any books. And when you say that, people think that you were really poor, and we weren't. It was just my mother was dyslexic and she couldn't read, and so she just didn't get this whole book thing. And my father was very, very busy working, and so we didn't really have many books around, although, you know, eventually we did get books for kids. So the local library was really important to me, and I was just obsessed with story. And I actually think I could have ended up, you know, working in any element of story. You wouldn't have had to have been a writer, but I got married and I had a baby, and this is nearly 30 years ago now, because Molly will be 29 this November. And I decided that I couldn't carry on with my job. I was effectively, when I split up from my first husband, I was single, running this flat, and I was running this kid, and I was trying to run me and do this job which was very busy. I thought, I can't do all this, I've got to find something I can do at home. And I got very drunk one night, and a friend was over, and we wrote a big long list of things you could do from home, which included all kinds of things. You know, set up a jam company and start doing, you know, have people over to do hair and all this kind of stuff. And one of them was write a book. And I thought, I'll write a book, and, you know, I can say I'm doing that. Actually, what I thought was, I can say I'm doing that for a year, and everyone will get off my back. And so I quit my job, which is, this is terrible advice, by the way. If you're thinking you're writing a book, don't do this. I quit my job. I went to the library, and I read that a novel was 70,000 words. And I thought, right, if I write 1,000 words a day, 5 days a week for 14 weeks, I'll have a novel. And I did. And I think because I had read books all my life, I mean, just obsessively read books, I had absorbed a lot of the critical theory that you need to make that kind of work. Mm-hmm. And then I sent off, there were 96 publishers of fiction in those days, not anymore, in the UK. And I got 96 copies of this book. It's, again, terrible advice, don't do this. 96 copies of this book, and I sent one to every single publisher. I wheeled them down to the post office in my daughter's pram and posted it. Oh, great. Should definitely not have worked. I mean, there's no way this should have worked, but within 3 weeks, I had my first offer. And I then had the nous to get in touch with 3 agents and say, I've got an offer and I don't know what to do. Yeah. And ended up sort of bagging myself an agent. So, and that book went into the top 50, and it was nominated for a Saltire, and it was kind of, for a first book, it did really, really well. It was called Truth or Dare. And yeah, that was kind of how I got started. And once I got started, that was me hooked. So yeah, that's how I started. But it was never something that I thought I must write, but I always enjoyed story, and I think my dream job would always have been in story, whether that was in TV or film or production or whatever. Some element of that.
Wow, that's truly, I guess most authors would be very envious of that.
I feel really bad when I do book festivals, and people ask that question, and you tell that story in the whole of the front row, and you're just looking at them. You can see that there's people there who've been writing a book for 10 years or something awful, and I feel really bad about it. And I was just incredibly lucky, actually. I think and it was a good book. It wasn't that it was a bad book, but I think also the publishing industry has changed. There are fewer slots than there were, so nowadays you need to be talented and lucky and very lucky on top of that. It's never easy, but it has actually become more difficult, I think, to get published. And then once I was in it, I sort of started to get obsessed with history, and after about 3 novels I started to write historical, and that's really where my passion now is and has been for the last kind of 15 odd years.
And that must take a lot of study and work to, because each novel from a different part of the history.
The history of the world.
So you have to research all of that.
I think because the Mirabelles are set, the Mirabelle Bevan mysteries, which are kind of my murder mystery series, they're all set in the 50s. So you do kind of get a feel for what it was like in the 50s and kind of pick things up as you go along about it. So because you're writing a series of those, you go back, it's like meeting an old friend.
Yes.
You might have to look into a particular thing, but you don't have to start the research from scratch. But with the historical novels, the time frame's kind of 1820 to about 1845. And I'm currently writing the 5th one of that. And they're quite immersive. So all writers I know are very eccentric. Historical writers and fantasy writers are the worst because their world isn't actually real anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get immersed in this world where, magic is real, or there's no penicillin or whatever. You just get totally imaginatively engaged with it. And there's a reason writers have a kind of reputation of being a bit eccentric, and it is that you get sucked into something that, it's not real. So we're a pretty eccentric bunch.
I love that. Permission to be eccentric.
I used to try and pretend that I wasn't eccentric, but now I just put my hand up and say my mind's a bit odd and a bit strange. Sorry about that. Just kind of go with it.
Well, I've never experienced it. It's all very energizing each time I've met you, and I it's always great to spend time with you because of that. So when recently you've become interested in sort of feminist history in a way, would that be a proper way to describe it? Or
I think feminism is even an old-fashioned word of its own now, isn't it? It's all really about equality. I think of myself not as a feminist activist, but as an equality activist, much more. Mm-hmm. But I think I was always interested in the stories of women. From right at the beginning when I started writing, the stories of women were really important to me, and I've always had main protagonists who were female, even in the original books that I wrote, which were contemporary. So I've always been interested in those stories, and then when you start looking at history, that's where the gap is. Those are the stories that really haven't been told, and so that's a space that a novelist will immediately kind of move towards, even in material which is quite gendered towards men. So I would take, for example, the first historical novel I ever wrote was based on an adventure that a guy called Robert Fortune had, who was from Kellow in Berwickshire. And he was sent by the East India Company into China to steal tea plants right after the Opium Wars. They were worried because their supply of tea had been stopped. And so they decided they wanted to set up tea plantations of their own, and they wanted to do that in the Himalayas. But they didn't know how to do it. And so Fortune was a gardener. He had been looking after the orchid houses in Kew, and he was very tough. And they said, right, you go into China, see if you can pick up some tea plants and some tea gardeners and bring them back to us. And he did. He went in and he disappeared for 3 years inside China, and everyone thought he was dead. And then he appeared on the other side of the country and loaded, I think, about 17,000 tea plants and 40 odd tea gardeners onto a ship, took them to India, and they set up the Himalayan tea plantations that the East India had in the it started in the 1840s in India. Although there was a little bit of tea production in India already, that was kind of when it really sort of took off.
Yeah.
So I wrote a book which was a female story that wound in between the the actual reality of what Robert Fortune did. So anytime he disappeared for a week, in his memoir, I would have something would happen with this woman. And that's sort of been a key sort of way of doing it, because the female material isn't there, so you've got to get knitting.
Yeah, very appropriate. Yeah. For those days. Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing at the moment. The book that I'm editing at the moment, which I've been writing right through lockdown, is set in 1822 in Edinburgh, and it's in the run-up to George IV's visit to Edinburgh. And so the real life characters are Sir Walter Scott, who organised the King's visit, and William McNabb, who was the head gardener down at the Royal Botanic Gardens, and Robert Graham, who was a professor at the university. These are real characters. Yeah. Between their stories, I am weaving a kind of romp, really, with a whole load of women. Most of whom are not, most of whom are fictional, a couple of whom are real, but most of whom are fictional.
Is it easier doing the fictional ones? I'm guessing. You've got a bit more.
Real life quite often provides a kind of skeleton. So, so you want, like, the real stuff's it's quite nice to have that as a structure. And certainly, the book that I think you're probably thinking of is Where Are the Women, which was where I remapped Scotland according to women's history. So it's a real map and it's real history, but sort of imagined guidebook of monuments to women, because we just really don't do monuments to our female heritage. Not just in Scotland, actually, all over the world, people tend to not do that. So that's, I think that's the book you're thinking of.
Yes, it is. It is. And do you find that's the one that people are drawn to talking about now when you speak about?
Yeah, I mean, it's only been out. It's been out for 2 years. We're just about to get the paperback of it, so it'd be quite normal for a book that's just coming for people to talk about that. But I think it has enraged a lot of people.
Oh, right.
So people, will read the section of where they live and then say, but why didn't I know the story of these, like, 150 women that come from the same part of the country as me, or 200 women sometimes? Why do I only know about one or two of these? And they feel very, sort of confused and cheated. And I've had some sort of fun emails from people saying, I'm so angry, I'm going to go and try and get a statue to this woman. I didn't realize that she even lived here, And so, at the moment, you get a lot of feedback for that. But then when you have a series like the Mirabelles, people come back because they're following the story.
Yes.
So every year when the Mirabelle comes out, people say, it's not the last Mirabelle, is it? And I'm like, no, don't worry, I'm writing the next Mirabelle. I'm on it. So people get into that because it's a series.
So they're waiting for the next one to come out.
Me too. I never know what's going to happen in the story. So as
well. Was there a favourite story of yours about the women? Favourite in that it had the most impact?
I think that I was really struck by the suffragettes, because they were so wild. I mean, they really were very transgressive in terms of what women were supposed to do in that era. And so the suffragette and some of the suffragist stories as well, the suffragettes were kind of violent, but there were some suffragists who did things that were just really thrawn and gallous and great. And so Mary Maloney, who rang a bell during the 1908 election, was Churchill was fighting in Dundee, and he said he wasn't going to discuss the suffrage, it just wasn't important, and Mary Maloney was not having that, and she followed him around and rang a bell whenever he tried to speak and said, if you're not going to talk about the suffrage, Winston, you're not going to talk about anything. And he completely lost it. He got really angry with her and stormed out of meetings, and at one point they tried to stop her ringing the bell, and she said, who wants to hear Mr. Churchill speak? I'm going to speak. Who wants to hear me? And everyone went, let's hear what you've got to say, Mary. And it's just a really fun story.
Yeah.
And she died young, actually. I found out recently, because these are not complete biographies, so I didn't know what happened to Mary Maloney. And it turned out she died in the 1920s in childbirth. So she saw the vote come in. She saw that it had happened, but she died sort of quite within a decade of that, very young, in her 30s. So yeah. So those kind of women, I think, I found, and because they are the same age very often, or would be the same age as my great-grandmother, or something in between my great-grandmother and my granny, I feel like almost like I could touch them.
Yeah.
You know, they were on the streets at the same time as someone that I know, someone whose hand I've held.
Yes.
And so that makes a real kind of connection to that generation of women to whom we owe a huge amount. So Scottish suffragettes are amazing.
Yes, yes. Wow. Yes. So many. I think you'll get some more sales of the books after.
Oh yeah.
Especially if it's coming out in paperback.
Well, it's going to come out next year. It was supposed to come out this year, and I'm always militating with Where Are the Women? Can I get more women in? And when we were going to do the paperback, I phoned the publisher and I said, look, can I just fit in? Because it's all the way through writing. I was like, could I just add another? So I said, could I just add a few more women? And they said, no. And I went, please. And eventually talked them into, at the end of the hardback, there were some half pages at the end of the chapters.
Right.
And I said to them, can I take those half pages and put in some extra women? So I think we have about 10 women in the paperback that are not going to have been in the hardback, because my maxim for writing the women, Where the Women, was no women left behind.
Yes.
So there's about 1,200 stories in that book, just snapshots of, women who achieved things.
That's yeah, there's some fantastic stories in there, aren't there? And you wouldn't be tempted to write another book with more that you've learned about, or I guess it would need to have a slightly different slant and things.
I mean, the book on that kind of vibe that I'm looking at doing, and I'm booked up into next year now, so I can't write it now, but I want to, would be a series of essays about our worst misogynists. Because during the course of looking at the women, I discovered all these terrible men, and most of them are men. There's one or two that are female, but most of them are men, because they had the power. And so it's judges that make decisions that then get become part of precedents in rape cases, or ministers who behave in a certain way that sort of means that women are treated badly in a particular, for 100 years or something. So it's misogynists who had real impact on equality. I've written a couple of the essays in it. One of them is about John Knox, who was pretty awful. And there's another essay about Lord Justice Hale, who's a sort of 18th century, late 17th, early 18th century judge, who is, when you're reading in the newspapers about rape trials and they're talking about what the woman's wearing, that was a precedent set by Lord Justice Hale's ruling, and it's still with us. So he gets an honourable mention in the book of terrible misogynists. But I don't know if anyone will publish this. I just started writing it.
Yes,
I never worry about that. I write it and I give it to my agent, and she feels like, oh, really, Sarah? And I'm like, yeah. So I've started to write this book, and poor Glennie, she's gonna have to try and sell it.
Yes, you'll have to start wearing the bulletproof vest for you. So, I mean, they're such political books, aren't they? When you're tapping into things around equality, and as I said earlier, that was how we met in the run to the referendum, and how we all got to meet such amazing women over that time, and men as well, of course, but as part of Women for Independence. And when you were talking of poor Mary, having lost her life, that I shared a story when I was talking at the Scottish Independence Convention, and I'd been diagnosed with breast cancer again, which is my story. And my thought, it was that new year, and my thought was, you know, embracing a new year and thinking, I don't want to die before we have an independent Scotland. And it came into my head from nowhere. I hadn't been thinking about those things, and it sort of hit me in the solar plexus. And I think, you know, sometimes that, you know, what you want to do before you die becomes hugely figural when your life's threatened, as you were talking.
I feel like Margot McDonald. When you talk
Yeah.
about that, it brings to me
Yes.
Margot McDonald who, you
Yeah.
know, she's done anything to be able to stay and keep fighting, really.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
amazing. So
Very, very true.
still got you though.
Doing my bit, yes. Yeah. So but looking back to that time, Sarah, I'm going to ask one more question, and then I think I'll let some of the audience, I think we're down to ask some questions. I've seen some chat things popping up. But one more question for me. What got you involved at that time in your life? I mean, you're clearly hugely busy, you're writing, you're doing your book festivals, you know, you've got a busy and full life. What made you get involved with the...
I just think it was so, I knew it was so important that I couldn't not. I remember exactly what you were talking about. I remember having that feeling, you know, this is so important and I can't not do my best. If I don't get involved and try here, then I'll always know I didn't contribute, and I want to do my best to try and make it happen. I've just felt it was that important. But I started out like in 2012, I was a no. I was kind of a soft no, but it was just that I hadn't considered it. It seemed like a huge change. I was really busy with stuff, as you say. It just didn't seem like, it seemed like a very big change to me. And I say that as someone who lived in Ireland for a long time. My daughter was born in Ireland, so I you know, I was minded to, you know, I knew that was possible, if you like. And I'm very much a Republican. I've always been a Republican. Not that that's necessarily part of the yes, you know, the yes ethos, but, you know, it's not that I hadn't thought about, you know, some of the stuff, but I just thought, why would we do that? That doesn't make any sense to me. And then gradually 2012, 2013, I was reading a lot of articles and having interesting discussions, and there just seemed to be people who were just really getting into it. And I was like, oh yeah, that's an interesting point. I would hear something and think, oh yeah, that's an interesting point. And by the end of 2013, I was like, I've just got to read about this. I've got to sit down and study it the way I would, you know, the way I would, you know, something I was going to write about. Yeah. And actually there was something about that process. Although I've always written in novels about justice or fairness or unfairness and how bad that is, I had never written about it directly. And there was a process in which I think I hadn't trusted my own voice. I'd had to almost have the cover of somebody else's voice. You know, this is just a story kind of thing. And I began to read and seek discussions. So I went to a lot of events, and you know, it was such an amazing time for like standing next to someone in the coffee shop or, you know, in a bus queue and saying, what do you think about North Sea oil? You know, just be having all these sort of bizarre conversations. And after about 2 or 3 months of reading, I was like, actually, we can do this, and we can do something that's a lot better than what we've got. And you know, just looking at the way Westminster worked didn't make any sense to me once I actually started to consider the other ways that you could do things. And yeah, that was it. So, and then I took, I think, about 6 months off, maybe 5 months off after that, where I just thought, I've got to fling myself into this. And I did some campaigning with the National Collective, doing some events for them. And I made myself available to do press, particularly outside the country, because there were a lot of politicians who just really felt they had to be in Scotland, and that they, you know, they couldn't go to, you know, Amsterdam and be on a politics program over there, because what was the point? Yeah. The case had to be made here. And so I got myself on a list of people who are prepared to go and have those conversations. And during the course of that, joined Women for Indie, met you, and lots of other amazing women, and just began to campaign and write articles and just do whatever I could possibly think of doing. So yeah, it was pretty gutting because I actually genuinely did do my best. And I was like, oh no, on September the 19th, we're sitting on the sofa in the living room here, just crying, just crying for a long, long time. And then one of my friends who lives about 3 blocks away turned up, and she came with a bottle of whiskey and carried out coffee, and she was a no. She'd been a no. And that was when I knew, I thought it's going to be okay.
Yes.
Because this friend of mine who actually saw the other week, she's now moved out to the West Coast, and we went on holiday and went to visit her. Just realizing that, she accepted, I suppose, that we had had a point and that we'd had a fair fight.
Yes.
And I think it was, genuinely think it was pretty much a fair fight. But now we're up for another one. And she has changed her mind. Ha ha ha.
Oh, has she?
She's yes now. And I never thought in my life I would see her be yes. In fact, we have a friend who has a Union Jack tattoo who has changed his mind, which is one of the best things. What are you going to do?
Has he got the saltire on the other arm?
Yeah, he's going to have to do something. I don't know what he's going to do. It's on his arm. So yeah, he's a Union Jack tattoo, and he's changed his mind. So that is... I suppose it was just that lesson that I learned is, you can carry on that discussion.
Yeah, you keep it open, and that's really all that Voices is about. So these are great stories for that. Yeah. So I wonder if we've got some people wanting to come in. Clara's been keeping an eye on the chat there. Do you want to... You're muted, Clara, or do you want to message me, or do you want to bring someone in?
Well, we had Ian Old talking about Dame Margaret Henderson. I don't know if Ian wants to come in and say what he's saying, or I can just read it. But Ian, I'll try to.
I put up a statue in the book to her. I think I put her where David Hume actually is, outside the High Court in Edinburgh. So yeah, he's absolutely right. We have a long history actually of amazing women within Scotland. We in every field, and I think I didn't really realize how amazing it was till I started to do the research in this book, and suddenly I was just surrounded by these amazing biographies. I worked through 3,000 or 4,000 biographies. Wow. To do the research, not necessarily whole books. Some of them were just entries in dictionaries of biography, or trying to find these women. And the thing that blew me away was how many there are. We have world-class scientists, lawyers, actors, actresses, writers, poets, dramatists, musicians. And we're just very good at forgetting those stories. So, yeah.
And as you say, something that's echoed across the Western world, it's not peculiar to Scotland, sadly.
No, not at all. In fact, in a way, we have quite a... one of the reasons that Scottish women were so gallous was that they had not bad legal rights. Right. Not equality, stole the ball, not actual equality. Yeah. But we had, for example, limited property rights, and we could keep our own names, which actually makes it an absolute nightmare to research, because you find these women who have 3 different names because they've kept their own name and they've got 2 husbands as well. It's all a bit kind of confusing. But, we did have a lot more legal agency historically than, for example, women in England. In fact, the very first call for women MPs was after Culloden. So after Culloden, everyone was arrested, and a lot of women were arrested for organising supply lines and hiding, retreating Jacobites and all kinds of stuff like that. And they were all up in court. And for about 6 months to a year, the whole of all over Britain, the courts were absolutely jam-packed full of Jacobites. The women were up, and Scottish women were found guilty and paid their own fines. And English women were like, what the hell is this? What? Because in England, if you got fined, your nearest male relative had to pay your fine, and actually could go to prison if you didn't pay. He would go to prison, you wouldn't, if he didn't pay your fine. Okay. It's an excellent form of revenge, I feel. Anyway, so these English women, particularly posh English women, were absolutely outraged. And the following year, 1847, petitioned Westminster for female MPs because they wanted representation so they could get legal rights. And they hadn't realised that they could have got legal rights. They didn't realise there was any difference, which shows you the importance of role modelling.
Yes, absolutely.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Scots law is kind of a midway in Gaelic law, which was in force certainly during the medieval period and actually a little bit into the early modern as well in Ireland and in some areas in Scotland, so around about Argyll, you know, the part of Scotland that you would think of as being most Irish influence. Women had even more rights and had the right to divorce. They had the right to, you know, keep their kids if they got divorced, if they got separated. They had the right to property upon divorce. So, you know, there's a reason that Scottish women come across sometimes as strong. We've had a longer history of greater rights.
Greater rights, yeah, yeah. It's interesting how that then starts to enact through the people themselves. Yeah, yeah.
Well, this is the reason that history is so important. That history is so important because it is where we come from. Yes. And even if we don't know those stories, we still come from that place, and it's really important to understand where we come from, because once you know that, you're like, oh, okay, so this is why I am the way that I am. Yeah. And that's a revelation. That's part of understanding yourself and your place in society and your culture, is to understand the real place that you're from. And I say that it's not gendered. I say that for men as much as women. You know, if you're a guy and you think it was the guys that did everything, you're taking a lot on your own shoulders. Because it wasn't.
It was.
It genuinely wasn't.
Yeah, yeah. Mm. What fascinating story. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, Mr. Old.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I'm just going to look at the other chats. I saw Selma having...
Selma dotted off, I think.
Oh, did she? Oh,
yeah,
she have to go.
Bye, Selma.
Oh, that's a pity. That's a pity. Yeah, because I think she was desperate to have something to say. Yeah.
I bump into Selma regularly, who's also someone I met through Women for Indie. She's always got amazing ideas. She just like, she'll, what do you think about this? And you're like, you're meeting into a great conversation.
Yeah, she's and I think she stayed involved with Women for Indie as well all this time, as many people have. Yeah. What do you think? I mean, what's your thoughts about the next referendum?
I'm excited. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen because nobody does, and you know, COVID's a bit of a wild card. I think Brexit's going to be grim. I think even if we get a deal, it's not going to be a very good deal. And if we get a no deal, it's going to be really tough. I think there's a lot of internal SNP. I'm not an SNP member, but there's seems to be a lot of internal SNP criticism of Nicola Sturgeon. But Nicola Sturgeon's, you know, competence really has seen the figures rise.
Yes,
and that's what's done it. And Nicola's been able to bring over people that I think Salmon might not have been able to. Because she's just a different personality type. So yeah, I think we're getting somewhere quite exciting, I hope. And I mean, we just don't know what's going to happen. And I think that if there's one thing the COVID crisis has taught us is we don't know what's going to happen. But if there's another thing the COVID crisis has taught us, it is Westminster is really not fit for purpose. And you know, that's something that I have felt all along, but I know other people maybe haven't sort of looked at it that way. They thought, well, it's good enough. And I think we're at the point where we need to look Westminster in the eye and say this just actually isn't good enough. And I can't see how the kind of internal systems or the changes that would need to be put in place to make Westminster good enough or even good. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be good enough, maybe to make it great, can be put into place. So I think that that is a very strong argument for Indie that we can do this better ourselves. And I think that's an argument that's kind of winning out really at the moment. So I feel kind of broadly optimistic. I have no idea how long it'll take. I have no idea how it will happen, but I just feel that if this continues and people continue, the numbers continue to rise, it's got to happen. Otherwise it's a lock-in. You know,
Yeah.
otherwise we are, you know, we've been kidnapped, and that just can't be the case. You can't have a contract where there is no exit clause. You know, that is just not modern sort of, that is just not the modern way.
No,
It's not the way in the world. You can't have a contract into which there is no exit clause. So if Westminster continues to deny the idea of having a referendum, then my view would be, we say, well, how is it you know, what is the exit clause to this agreement? Explain to us how to do it. And I think there is a great deal of pressure to be brought to bear from outside the UK actually as well.
Yeah, I think there has been seen a huge inequality for Scotland and Scotland's needs and desires, and people really recognise that since Brexit, which has been a really interesting thing to happen. I have an aunt and uncle in Belgium, and my aunt was saying to me, it would have been just after Brexit, that no one had ever known where Scotland was before. When they were going to visit, it was just assumed it was England, and Scotland was just part of it. And now everyone knows who Scotland are. Yeah,
I think that that's. I don't know if that's true everywhere, but I think there is some places, some people certainly for whom that is true, and more. You know, because we're vocal. We're nothing if not vocal.
No, and what Nicola has done, as she described it, is show not tell. So by looking like a very able leader and being an able leader, that people have started to give her that authority, really, rightly so. Yeah. So what other questions have we got for Sara, or comments?
I was wondering if any of your books have been translated into other languages. Is there an interest in Scottish historical fiction abroad, thinking of Outlander? Also, the statue book could be replicated in other countries, blah, blah, blah. Hi, Anne. I like the way you're thinking. Yes, some of my books have been translated into other languages. It's very weird because I can't read them. So you occasionally get like, you know, oh, here in Serbian is a book that you wrote, and you look at it and think, I can't even tell, you know, I can't tell what any of the words are, which is quite a weird sort of, you know, it's quite a weird kind of feeling. And that's all over the world. I've got books that get sent back to me in Korean and all kinds of things. So that happens twice a year. There's a big book fair in Frankfurt and a big book fair in London. Your agent goes down and sells foreign rights generally at one of the two events. They've not all gone into lots and lots of translations, but some of them have, and that's very exciting. I don't only write Scottish historical fiction, so I write fiction. My interest really, I suppose, in a way, is in the British Empire. So that first period I write in the early 19th century one is sort of the rise of the British Empire, and the 50s is the tailing off. And my interest in that is kind of a lot about our identity, even though we maybe don't want it to be. It's actually what Brexit's about in part. So I've been interested in that for the last 15 years. I'm like, oh my God, this is a thing that is a big sort of thing. So some of the stuff's set in Scotland and some of it isn't. And it does depend, actually. You get, you know, you'll be speaking to a German publisher at something and they will say, oh, we are not interested in this because it is in China, but we like the one you have done in Brazil. And these different, you know, different publishing regions seem to have interests in particular other areas. So the one in Brazil, for example, did go into Spanish, of course. Actually, of course.
Yeah.
I would love to replicate the statues book in other countries. I have actually already pitched, my agent's already pitched to a couple of Irish publishers who have really not been interested, which I think is a bit of a tragedy. But you never know. In publishing, you just keep pitching until someone says yes. And I would like to work with publishers, even if I'm not writing the book, because I learned a lot doing it. I learned a lot about that kind of huge research project and crunching that information, and how to do it better. I think, you know, how to do it more efficiently maybe next time. So yeah, it would be great to work with somebody who was going to do that and help that person to do it better than I did, I suppose. And I'd love to do Ireland because I lived in Ireland for a long time. I went to Trinity, so I feel quite an affinity with Ireland. So if any Irish publishers are out there, yeah, I would love to come and do Where Are the Women in Ireland? Yes, please.
Yeah, that would be a very interesting story.
And there are some Irish women. I mean, I've done threads of women who were, because of the Argyll connection, there are actually quite a lot of Irish women who impinged on Scottish history and kind of vice versa. So
yeah.
A crossover.
Yes, yeah. And again, I guess the country has to be right for it. Is there something about what will become more acceptable in Ireland as trends and yeah, there's sort of
I don't know if it's that. I think it's more about publishing, you know, honestly, Audrey, because literally I just buttonholed a publisher from Historic Environment Scotland that I'd done something else for and said, look, you've not got enough stuff about women's history, can we do something? And literally it just takes somebody coming in and being prepared to pitch it, and one publisher to say, oh yeah, we'll do that. And then you're off. Do you know what I mean? And then it's, you know, whether how well it sells is about whether the country's ready for it or not.
Yeah, that's true.
Just one person who's like, this is a great idea and I want to produce it. I think because Ireland is, you know, Ireland, when I lived in Ireland in the 80s, you know, you couldn't get the contraceptive pill, there was no divorce, and being gay was illegal. There was a gay nightclub in Dublin called Sides, which is where I met my first husband. Everyone used to go to Sides because it was much cooler than the other nightclubs. And there was only one person who went to Sides who would admit that he was gay. His name was Mick Wilson. He now runs the art department at the College of Art and Design in Dublin. So I remember it when Mick Wilson was the only gay man in Dublin, because he used to go to Silent. It was illegal. It was actually illegal, and you could be locked up for it. So Ireland's changed a lot in the last sort of 30-something years. And I think it's more than ready. And in fact, one of my pals, who's an Irish Times journalist, did a 2-page article where she did, I think, like a dozen female monuments, and that seems to have gone down really well. So I think Ireland is ready, but hey, we'll see what commissions come in.
Yeah, that would be really exciting. It feels to me like there's a campaign to get your book as part of the curriculum in Scotland, you know, so that there's some balance. I mean, during the run-up to the independence referendum, I realised how ignorant I was on Scottish history, and we just hadn't learned it at school. Didn't learn it.
I think a lot's changed since 2014, and I think actually social media has been great for that, because, you know, somebody who's got an obsession about, I don't know, sword fights or something, somebody who's got an obsession about, you know, Jacobite secret caves, all the kind of, you know, all that madness, that people can have an outlet for that now. You don't need to be printed in a newspaper. You can put up something on Facebook or something on Twitter. And I started doing these women's history threads on Twitter last year, and people really love them. And they're just literally 10 snapshots of women who, you know, Irish women who were in Scotland, or medieval women, or whatever it is, you know, those women. And people really respond to that. So I think a lot has actually changed since 2014 in terms of people's access to that information.
Yeah. I think you're right. And your Twitter feed is amazing. It strikes me that it would be, not your Twitter feed, but the book would be an amazing series. And, you know, we get endless series that other people do about, you know, through a different lens, shall we say. So
I love the series. It's time, you know, it's time, and also finding someone that wants to produce it. It's the same issue as the Irish version. You've got to have a producer that really wants to do it and will kind of come in with you and get behind it. I know Susan Coleman has a copy of the book, because I sent it to her, she asked for it, and she's been doing Secret Scotland, and I think she's been in a few of those stories, I hope, in the book. But it'd be nice to do a kind of dedicated series, wouldn't it, of, you know, who comes from where and sort of Scottish women.
I'd be first in the queue to watch it. Great. Any more questions coming through in the chat? He chats disappeared off the screen.
Well, an awfully quiet chat.
Yes,
I think I was wondering, before we actually went live, you were talking about how you were talking to 16-year-olds and talking about equality. And I've been doing quite a lot of like local activism in my neighborhood, and what I always thought was like, it was always really weird because I was often like the only young woman in the room, and very often overshouted by men, but also by women. It wasn't just men, but mainly men. And often men like that also didn't know specifically much on a topic. And whenever I asked my female friends to come along, they was like, oh, I don't know enough about it. I don't want to come along. And I just wonder, like, or the impact of having no statues or having too little representation has actually on, like, you know, generations still now. But if you feel that from speaking with those younger people early on, if there's a bit of a change happening. And
the younger generation is amazing. If I think where I was at 16, 17, 18, I am not where they are. Their expectation, young women's expectation today is that they should be listened to. They might not always be listened to, but my expectation was I'd be lucky if I got to say anything, and actually I wouldn't have found my voice. But their expectation is that they should be listened to, and they have a very clear view of what their right is. I mean, we were away in Glasgow about 2 weeks ago. We had a kind of holiday at home. We went to Glasgow and Butte and things. And I met a pal in Glasgow, and we were talking about, she had her daughter with her, and we were talking about the 80s when guys used to pat your bum. And her daughter said, but did you not just phone the police? And we were like, what? You'd have just had a hotline to the police the whole time. Do you know what I mean? Things have changed, and those young women have much more agency over their own bodies, over their own behavior, over their own choices. And I think quite often the expectation of people is that we are not making progress. You know, there's that, people often think we're not making progress, things are definitely getting worse. All the work I do with final couple of years school kids tells me that things are getting better.
Yeah.
You know, and that those voices deserve to be heard. That said, women's voices are extremely contentious. Somebody who's written about this a lot is Mary Beard. If you're interested, I would suggest looking at some of her writing about, you know, just classical references even to, you know, the contentiousness of women's voices and listening to women's voices. And it's quite disheartening, really, to see laid out before you 2,000 years of history where women, you know, were talked over exactly what you're talking about. And how do we challenge that? And all we can do every day is wake up ready to, I suppose. You know, because it is that micro thing. It is making people realize what they're doing. I think a lot of the time this stuff is so ingrained. Until I wrote the book, I didn't realise that as I walked almost every day along George Street in Edinburgh, every single statue is male. And I didn't realise till I started writing the book. And then I was outraged. I walk along George Street raging now. Every time I walk past, I'm like, what is George III doing here? Why are you here, sir? Why is there a statue of Prince Albert in the middle of Charlotte Square? For goodness sake. You know, it really, really makes me angry. And it isn't until we remember to notice that we begin to be able to change, and that involves it being pointed out to people very often. Sometimes you realize for yourself, as I did, because I happened to be doing something in particular, but sometimes it is your kid telling you, or your mum pointing it out to you, or whatever it is. And we've got a question here from Parami Macmillan. You said you don't consider yourself a feminist anymore. Is that because you don't think it's needed, or because your understanding of feminism has changed? I do consider myself a feminist to some degree, but I think a better way of expressing it is as an equality activist, because I think until we are militating for all minority rights, that's a big part of my feminism, I suppose, is what I'm saying. And so Black Lives Matter is as important to me as, you know, Women's History Month or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And so, yeah, I think a better way of expressing it for me is equality. Now, that's not for all feminists, obviously. It's quite interesting looking at the way that this works between the generations. so my mother does consider herself a feminist. She is not a feminist by any modern understanding of the world. This is an 83-year-old woman. I mean, she thinks the pill was a good idea. And at about 1972, she stopped. And, you know, the third wave passed her by. And so she'll talk about what a feminist she is, and myself and my sisters-in-law and my daughter and my nieces are looking at her as if to say, really though? Because, you know, it's a very low bar to think that, you know, it's okay to decide whether you want to have kids or not, but that's the bar she's at. And so I think feminism means a lot of different things to different people, whereas equality tends to mean the same thing. So I think it's a better way of expressing it.
Yeah,
that's a good question, Parami.
Yeah, I was going to ask, yes, the link to Black Lives Matters and the statues, and the statues on George Street, for example. Do you have a strong feeling about whether, you know, some of these statues of the old slave owners should be down, or, you know, should it be balanced by other people, or should they have plaques on them? What's your sense of that?
My feeling with and there's different ways of commemoration. Okay, so my feeling with statues is statues are about honouring. Statues are about putting someone on plinth and saying this is what we should be aspiring to, and certainly with people like Henry Melville, which is the big one in Edinburgh, the sort of enormous statue. It's on a huge column, large phallic symbol with Henry Melville on top. And my view is that should be taken down. No question in my mind that should be taken down. We should not be honouring the memory of that man. Now, I don't think we should then break up that statue. I think we should put that statue in a museum or in a statue park somewhere, and that is the place to have the discussion around these very right-wing erstwhile conservative politicians who perpetuated slavery. And although Henry Melville, there is an argument that Henry Melville decided that slavery was a bad thing, I'm not really buying that article, so that argument, because what Henry Melville did was delayed the 1807 bill that went through to ban slavery, and he did so specifically so that the slave trade could be wound down slowly, and plantation owners in the colonies could put in breeding programs so they could breed their own slaves. This is not a good man. This is not a man I want to show my kids and say one day you should be, you know, I hope you're like this guy. That's not where we should be. And there are a number of guys, male statues around Edinburgh that are, they're not necessarily slavers. I mean, I think the statue of David Livingstone, for example, in Princess Street Gardens, I feel like that one could be moved. I'm not sure what I'm saying to people, that I think this great colonialist missionary, who was a really unsuccessful missionary, actually didn't even succeed at what he set out to do. And he was interested in science, and yeah, fair enough. But actually, does he deserve a huge statue in Princess Street Gardens when we don't have a statue to Sophia Jex-Blake or Eunice Murray or Elsie Ingalls, or, you know, any of those people who really achieved positive change within society and saved lives and had a really positive impact? And I think those slots, because we don't have an endless amount of slots in the centre of our cities, we need to honour the people who actually did good stuff.
Good thing.
And some of them are women.
Yeah.
About half of them are women. That's the reality.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder, it's such a difficult decision for the council on these things, isn't it? Where do you start and where does it end? But it does feel, now that our awareness is raised, it does feel there needs to be change. Yeah.
I mean, they've put up a plaque, they've put up an information board that talks about this kind of stuff. But for me, that's, you know, it's not what statues are there to do. We're not there to, statues are not a history lesson. Mm-hmm. Statues are there to honour and to role model, and role modelling is really important. And if you have, you know, a boy on one side of George Street walking up the street, all he sees are people that looks like him up on plinths, and a girl on the other side walking along George Street sees no one who looks like her. And what is that saying to younger people.
Yeah.
You know, what is that saying about, you know, what can you achieve if we just don't ever show that? And really in central Edinburgh, you know, you're talking queens. So we have a Queen Victoria on top of the art gallery, and we have a couple of tiny Mary Queen of Scots. And that's it in central Edinburgh. We don't have a statue of a woman. We do have Helen Crummy out in Craigmillar. And that's great for people in Craigmillar, but it's not, you know, it's not part of the main thoroughfare of our city. And it's just kind of not good enough. Here's one from Stuart Brenner. Is there a crossover between your wonderful Twitter threads and Where Are the Women? Yes, there are. I sometimes include women that aren't in the book. I keep a file on my computer called Mind2, and the file of women that I've discovered afterwards, or one of the rules for Where Are the Women was everyone had to be dead. So obviously as time goes on, other people die and you think, oh, I'll put her on the list. So my list for Mind2 is to include this woman whenever you can. And I have that on, and sometimes I draw from my Mind2 list if a woman fits into a particular category. But a lot of them, yeah, they are. I just take them from Where Are the Women, which is, you know, it's 1,200 women, so it's quite a pool to choose from. Oh, Parami says she loves my Twitter feeds. Thank you.
Yeah. Stuart did a lovely image for our event today. So thanks so much for that, Stuart. If I was you, I'd be wanting that on my wall. So it looks gorgeous. It's lovely. Yeah.
I think this was a question from Parami again. She's asking if you're familiar with Alison Phipps or Phipps. And
no.
Does that coincide with your position on equality activism? Parami, do you want to come in and tell us a bit more about?
Yeah, tell us about Alison Phipps. Oh yeah, it's a bit further up. Sorry, I'm not used to reading all. I just look at the bottom.
It's fine. She wrote a book called Me Not You.
Okay.
Which was picking up a little bit on the Me Too movement, and talks quite a bit about, I read it a while back, but kind of critiques white feminism as being coming from a place of privilege and often being quite selective in the kind of causes that white feminism, particularly of a particular generation, kind of picks up. So you might find it interesting.
Really interesting. I'll put it on my list to read. Thank you. I mean, I think when you look at, you know, for example, the suffragettes that I'm saying I greatly admire, the Indian suffragettes, the colonial suffragettes, were often asked to march at the very end. So they're doing huge suffragette marches, and they stuck all the black women at the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got to admire them for what they achieved. On the other hand, that wasn't okay. And
she's not popular in some feminist circles, Alison Phipps. She's seen as quite controversial, but partly I think because of some of the arguments that are going on in feminism, women's movements at the moment, around trans women and around the kind of definitions.
Yeah. I think for me, it's got to be inclusive. I mean, for me, trans women are women, and I think as well, where you have the intersection of several minorities, you're looking at women who are, you know, lesbian, black, and female, or whatever. You know what I mean? You're looking at quite a lot of different things there, and those women are much more marginalised for lots of reasons. I come from a Jewish background. I'm very lucky in that I'm white passing. You know, and I had a really interesting conversation with a woman that we were at school together when we were kids, and she's Pakistani. Her family are Pakistani, and she was talking about, you know, you can never switch that off. You know, those microaggressions are always there. Whereas, you know, even in the summer, if I get a tan, I kind of look Italian sometimes, but I'm never going to get what she gets.
Yeah.
You know, and it's having a care for that. So yeah, that's my pleasure. Thank you for the tip.
Can I ask a question as well? I remember that like a few years ago, I read for the first time about the International Women's Peace Congress that was held in 1915, and I think at the time was like that only, even though 150 women from the UK wanted to go, only 3 were able to go because they weren't given a passport to leave. And I just think when I first read about it, I was like, I just can't believe this was happening, and I just never heard of it. And it was such a unbelievable thing.
So an absolute, and I'm going to say the word shit show. Passwords were a shit show for women. So when Florence Nightingale wanted to take nurses to the Crimea, those women were issued with cattle passports. Because a woman could not have her own passport. You were on your husband's passport, or sometimes you're on your father's passport, but you could not have a passport. I mean, and this goes on way, like having your own passport is quite a big deal. And I suppose once women get the vote, then you can't argue that their citizenship is not total, and women begin to have that kind of much more of that right. But I mean, as a kid, I think we were all on my father's passport, and that's the 70s.
Yeah.
So it's a bit weird when you discover, you remember things from your own life, you realize you're getting old, you remember things from your own life that shock younger people. So you're like, oh yeah, I totally remember when. And they're like, what? Oh no, I am actually living history now. And again, it's quite a good sign that things are changing, and hopefully in lots of respects are actually improving. But yeah, passports are a big one for women, and right through the Victorian era and into the Edwardian era as well. So.
Gosh, yeah. So, there's so much in it all. Yeah. And I, with your own Jewish background, have you gone into any of that more recent history, Sara, or is it something that you've been interested in exploring?
I mean, when you're brought up in a Jewish family, my mother's side of the family are Jewish, my father's side of the family are Catholic. So you're immediately brought into a household where there's a lot of conversations going on. Yeah. I've always been in a household, and consider myself actually quite lucky to have been brought up in a household where we all just had a good old argument about everything. Because I sometimes find it a bit strange, friends have families where they're not allowed to think different stuff. And I'm like, how does that work? Because that definitely isn't the way it is in my family. I think being brought up Jewish is quite scarring for my generation in some respect. I mean, I was trying to explain this to someone the other week where, when you're 10 or 11, maybe your friends are discovering that Santa isn't real, and you discover the Holocaust, and that's quite a lot for a 10-year-old. I mean, I had nightmares. And then if you're my generation, this didn't happen to my daughter's generation or my cousin's kids or anything, but for my generation, you realize that some of your parents' friends who are around your house, who are dancing at records and coming to parties, were in concentration camps. And that is just, wow. And how come they've never discussed this with you? How come you don't know that? And I, personally have friends whose parents, were in concentration camps. So that's quite a heavy thing for my generation of Jewish kids to carry. And then you've got the sort of shit show of Israel, and I, absolutely horrified at a great deal of what Israel is doing, at the same time as having that legacy within my family, and also the legacy, because my family, most of my mother's side of the family came to the UK from Russia. So they fled the pogroms, and that's in Russia, sort of around the Moscow area in the 1880s, and then what is present Poland in the 1910s, and that's on both sides of my mother's family as well. And this sense of, finding old letters in Russian were basically the last letters that came back before everybody died, because most of these the people they left behind, if you got out, you survived, and a lot of the people who were left behind died. In these shtetls. Yeah. So my family came from a shtetl just outside Moscow on that side of the family. So it's quite a lot as a kid to realise, to come from that kind of refugee background, really. And and then about 16 to discover, you're probably an atheist, but that wouldn't have saved you in Berlin. There's a lot of stuff that you're sort of carrying around a lot of the time of that, and trauma. And certainly my generation, my friends, Jewish friends of the same kind of age, we still carry a lot of that stuff with us. I tend to get the odd bit. I tend to, because I'm a nice smiley lady and I'm pretty white presenting, and actually I could be Spanish or Italian. I tend not to get a lot of microaggression. But occasionally you do. Occasionally you get, oh, your people this, or oh, your family must be like that, or just that kind of stuff. But that's pretty easy to deal with once you've found your own voice. The second novel I wrote was called Ma Polinsky's Pockets, and it's actually a sort of a girl who's haunted by her family's World War II history. Sorry, that's my dog going crazy. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And that was quite interesting for me to write. And I made a decision when I was writing the novel. I wasn't going to say explicitly that she was Jewish. The main character, Rachel, was Jewish, because of course, lots of people were persecuted during World War II in I don't know what's going on out there. I hope it's really exciting. It's always exciting for the dog. So yeah, I suppose I still struggle with that a little bit because I am culturally Jewish and come from that background, but also come from the sort of Catholic side, and I am an atheist, and so it's a little bit confused, I think, and I haven't ever really written about it apart from in that book.
And there's a lot of research that's gone on. I don't know if you've seen it around trauma and around secondary trauma. It's come from looking at the children of the generation who were in concentration camps, and so yes, it's huge, isn't it?
And I mean, I've got a friend whose both his parents were in a concentration camp as children.
Yeah,
and they came out, and he's in therapy. He's been in therapy for years. Let's put it like that. So it's quite a lot to kind of process. And then something like Brexit comes along, and a lot of my Jewish friends were like, "Oh my God, they're coming for us," because Brexit's so right wing. And so my initial response to Brexit was like, right, we've got to get out, because you know that 30% of the Berlin Jews survived because they saw it coming. And you think, I'm not going to be one of that 70% that didn't see it coming. I'm going to notice it. And everyone's going, you're totally overreacting. We're going to do a deal. It's going to be fine. And you're like, can you not see the fascists? So you have to be very careful. And I'm married to a great big Celtic, very white man who just says, what are you talking about? We'll fight this. And I'm like, we won't fight, we'll get out. So culturally, you're carrying a lot more than you realize you are. And the Brexit for a lot of people in the Jewish community has been really tough in a kind of quite hidden way, actually, because Jewish people tend to assimilate. Part of the culture is to assimilate because we can.
Yeah.
And so I think Brexit has been really quite shocking, actually, and a lot of the stuff that's going on down in London, you just look at and think, wow, welcome to 1936. And it really feels
horrible parallels, aren't there?
They really are. And it's different from somebody who's read it in a history book as to somebody who's met people who escaped that. That's a totally different. That's a different
story, isn't it?
So, so I'm trying to retain a good perspective on it by hiding behind my large white husband.
Handy. Yeah. Well, I'm looking at the time now. Goodness me, we're nearly at 7:15. Wonder if there's anything else that we've missed here. There's I've seen a lot of, you're going to get a great welcome from Glasgow, I think.
We got to send our Edinburgh flat first, so, but that's where we're heading. It's going to be fun.
Big adventure, a great city. They're so different, these cities, aren't they?
I think creatively it's going to be very different as well. I think I'm quite excited about that, because it's quite cliquey, the lit thing in Edinburgh. So I'm quite interested and hopeful that maybe it'll be a bit more fun, really, in Glasgow, and a bit more, because it's a bigger city. I think it's going to be exciting.
It's more diverse. There's no doubt. about that. Yeah. My only parallels here is I did a degree in Edinburgh, then did a master's in Glasgow, and I much preferred the Glasgow experience, and I did. But hey, I live in Edinburgh and I love it here as well.
There's a lot to love here.
Yeah.
We have actually a really nice time, but my husband's from the West Coast and my daughter's coming back and she's going to be in the West Coast, so it's kind of a whole
It makes sense. Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Just get the raincoat. That's all I'm saying.
We got the dog a raincoat. I actually got the dog a raincoat. She hates it. But she's going to like it when we get there, I think.
Yeah. She is gorgeous. She really is. Is she going to get her own Twitter feed at some point?
It's quite funny because some of my goddaughters said to me, "Oh, you're going to get Dottie an Instagram account." And I was like, "What?" No.
Yeah, that's actually the one to have, isn't it?
Yeah, I lurk on Instagram. I have an Instagram account, but I hardly follow anyone. I really just use it for spying on my nieces and my goddaughters. That's what Instagram is for me. And some people, I see people following me that I recognize their name from Twitter, and I'm like, oh, they're going to be so disappointed. Because my
Instagram account is only my cat and my dog. Occasionally a view of Edinburgh, and occasionally my grandson, who is just so gorgeous he has to appear. Your little dog Dottie, it is it? Yeah, she's absolutely beautiful. The door opened. You won't have seen that, but I didn't see her because she's little.
She's pretty small.
She wanted to make an appearance. So.
She was checking me out. She's like, "What are you doing in there?"
Now, I was telling you before we started, my dog made an appearance the last time I did one of these, so it was that wasn't fun for me. It was mega stressful because she's a lurcher and told a whole story very loudly. So.
I love it when they try and talk. Although hopeless. So here's somebody. Oh, blah blah blah. Thank you. Oh, somebody who's wearing Reek perfume.
Oh, right.
Reek we got collected by the National Museum and also by the Glasgow Women's Library. So we're now officially part of 2 national collections, which is really exciting. And it was kind of nice when we closed that they wanted to do that.
Yeah. That was a nice creative experience you had with that.
It was a mixture between the creative experience and the activism. Because we were a feminist company, and a lot of the stuff we did was about other perfume companies being extremely unsustainable in the way that they use their models and represent women's bodies and women's interests and things. So we wanted with Reek to give our models a voice, something you were talking about earlier, Clara, and not retouch photographs, not do that. We felt very foul of Facebook by not retouching photographs, because if you have photographs of skin, and perfume advertising is all about skin, you and you don't retouch it as a business, then Facebook think you're porn.
Oh.
And we got a black dot because we didn't do that. We're like, no, we're actually feminists, and they were like, no. You have not retouched your photographs. And even feminists ought to be doing that. So we had a massive big fight with Facebook, which obviously we lost. But yeah, it was a really good experience. It was a really interesting 4 years, and I'm really glad that I did it. And I now smell amazing all the time because I have a lot of different perfumes. We started a perfume library, and so I have all these perfumes now. So that's something, because perfumes, if I wasn't doing something with words, I would be doing something with smells. So it's good.
Yeah. Well, are there any other questions or things people want to ask? Clara looks like she's bursting again to ask something. Are you?
No, I was just waving goodbye because I think Anne was saying that she's leaving now. I think
goodbye, Anne.
Yeah.
Well, nice to see you.
Time to close, I think. Anything else you want to say?
Not really. Thank you for coming along, and thanks, Audrey. It's always nice to have a chat with you. It was good fun.
Yeah, it was really good fun. And I just want to ask so many more questions. And next time, over a glass of something.
You're on.
Before you go to Glasgow.
I'm coming back sometimes, don't worry. will be not.
I'll be up the road.
I will be back in Edinburgh sometime.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough. It's been a fascinating evening, and I'm sure others have felt that as much as I have. I hope you'll come back at some point and tell us more stories. You've got a fund of interesting things to do, to tell, and for us all to learn from. So I've learned lots this evening. I'm sure others have too. Sara, this is the point where I have to do the we would value any support that anyone who's listening in, either live or afterwards when it goes on the website. We are funded by your support. So anything that anyone can give, particularly if you can give it every month. We've got a fundraising donation campaign saying, give us £5 a month until we have an independent Scotland. Obviously, if you want to give more than that, that would be wonderful. But we're only funded by donations from people. So anything that anyone can pass on, we'd be hugely grateful for. And these Thursday evenings, we have different people. We've got Jerry Hassan coming to talk about the work that he's been interested in doing recently, some of it about people who've changed their minds and what's led them to do that. No to yes, of course, from our point of view. And we've got a session on Black Lives Matter as well. So we've got some amazing discussions coming up. And Sara, you might be interested to know, this is an early, it's not an early warning. What am I trying to say, Clara? Early, I'm giving you information early about a fun festival we plan in December, because we reckon by December we're going to be so fed up of all the restrictions. We really want a bit of fun. So if you fancy doing a reading or of whatever for that, Sara would love to have you as part of it. Yeah.
The 1822 Edinburgh book.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I haven't written that yet, so it'll be a new thing.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great. Well, you're booked. I'll tell you the date. Is the date, tell you the date. Is it the 12th? Yeah, 12th of December. So
None of us are going anywhere.
No, I know. We're all in. We're all in.
I wonder what I'm doing that day.
You can't lie. You can't. Well, what a fabulous evening it's been. Yes, we'll carry on this conversation at some time, and it'd be great to have you back as well. And thanks for all you're doing with everything that is based on opening our eyes and making a difference in the world, and also enjoyment and fun. One of the things that's happened in lockdown is a lot more people have started reading again. So look out for the Mirabelle books and the many other books by itself. So thank you, and thanks everyone who's here just now and has been earlier, and hope to see you again. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.